Welcome to Theology Thursday.
You are fired! No, keep going. Keep going.
Welcome to Theology Thursday, an ecumenical space for students to discuss matters of faith and theology.
I'm your host, Connor Grubbs.
I am your co-host, Ryan Mock.
And I'm your co-host, Johnny Grubbs.
And he was laughing while Ryan was trying to do the intro. What is wrong with you?
I'm sorry,
We like to have fun here at Theology Thursday.
Sometimes a little too much fun.
And apparently Johnny doesn't know when to start. And
I
become
didn't
serious.
fully recover from the laughter we were having
but
pre-show.
Yeah, but
And
you're
it was
also
still
a heretic, so I don't even know why we let you back on the show. Ryan, why do we let him back on the show every week?
So we can make a fool out of him.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, no.
That's a
good
good.
He spilled water on his laptop.
Okay.
Just a little bit
Good
there.
job.
New laptop.
Okay, so my sub point,
Yes.
we're going to jump right into things today. My sub point is that the Irwin brothers have started a new faith-based movie studio.
The Irwin brothers?
Who are they,
Okay,
Connor?
so the Irwin brothers made actually my two favorite Christian movies.
Didn't
And there
they
aren't...
make Zaboomafoo?
No, stop it. And there
Zaboomafoo.
there aren't...
Zaboomafoo?
Yeah.
Guys,
Okay, sorry.
there aren't a lot of Christian movies that I like, but these two are actually some of my favorites. They made The Case for Christ,
Nice.
really good one, and they made I Can Only Imagine,
I can
Also-
only imagine.
also a really solid movie.
Yeah,
So
that's
Real quick, the reason I got confused, the Krat brothers made Zaboomafoo.
Yeah.
okay, nobody cares who made
Me
Zaboomafoo.
and you and Zaboomafoo.
Okay, so anyhow, they started this new Christian film studio. It's actually the first to be backed by a secular studio.
Oh, so they're not, it's not actually
Funding-wise?
Christian.
Wow.
No.
But that means that maybe their movie's actually good.
Well, it means they'll have more funding. Is what it means. They're back.
Oh, I just made a statement about the Christian movie
Yeah,
industry. I'm
boy.
so sorry.
No, one of our first podcasts was on that, but
That was our first
but
podcast.
you weren't on the show at that point. So it was. It's called Kingdom Studios. It's backed by Lionsgate, and their goal is to release 2 films a year. They've already announced what the first 4 are. One of them is a biopic of Jeremy Camp and when his wife died of cancer, and kind of tells that story. And they did a musician biopic before with I Can Only Imagine, so they have experience with that kind of thing. So hopefully it'll be good. And then the other thing they released that they announced that could be really good and also could be like really concerning. I'm not sure how I feel about it. They're describing it as a Bible cinematic universe.
What in the world?
And it's starting with a movie about the apostles right after Christ's ascension. So it's kind of the book of Acts kind of a movie, but they're going to do a bunch of them. With the same actors.
A Bible cinematic universe. So, like, the universe? Like, it's a true story.
No. They call cinematic universe. If you're not privy to this, is
You said privy.
is just a phrase that's used for like a shared movie continuity with like separate franchises that share the same continuity. So, like Marvel is called the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They coined that phrase, but other people have used it since. So they use that phrase to compare it to Marvel, what Marvel does.
So what cinematic universe are we in right now?
We're not in a cinematic universe. Can I take this call? I don't know who this is. But
Well,
it might be
Ryan
important.
took
You
a
want
call
me to
from his
take the call?
grandfather.
Yeah, no, hold on.
On the last podcast.
Oh, they hung up on me. Never mind.
Wow, they didn't
They
want
must
to talk
hate
to
you.
Yeah, like I answered and then
How does that make you feel, Connor?
I think I'm about to cry.
They're going to call you back in 5 seconds.
So, what was your sub point, Ryan? Or do you
Okay.
want to just skip to the main topic because
No,
nobody
it's
cares
fine.
about your sub point? Okay,
Oh
fine.
my goodness,
I
I'm
know.
sure the audience. Johnny, do you care about my sub
I
point?
care about
Yeah,
your
but he's a
subpoint,
heretic.
Ryan.
Okay, so
Right.
I read a book. It's always good to read. The book I read is called Delightin' in the Trinity by Michael Reeves. Okay, it's about the Trinity.
Sounds like a nerd book.
Well, it's not a nerd book because when you think about books of the Trinity, about the Trinity, you think about books that defend the Trinity, try and prove the Trinity through the Bible. But this book is not a defense of the Trinity. This book already assumes the Trinity is true. What this book is about is what the implications are for our lives with the Trinity.
Ooh.
Now, how does the Trinity affect us? How does the Trinity function in our salvation and our Christian walk? And how does the Trinity make God who He is? Because the Trinity is very unique to Christianity. It's what separates Christianity from other religions. And while a lot of people gloss over the Trinity as just this confusing little subpoint about God, the Trinity is actually probably one of the most important aspects to understand about God. because it really, talking about the Trinity, it has a lot of meaning to who God is and to who we are. So the book is easy to read, and it's also a quick read. It's a little over 100 pages, like 120 pages, and just 5 chapters, but it's pretty easy to get, to understand. So highly recommend it. Delighting in the Trinity by Michael Reeves.
I dig it. Hey, let's move into our main topic. There's no guest this week. It's just you're stuck with us. We're going to be talking about apologetics, defending the faith. We've had a lot of people actually ask that we talk about this. So tonight is more of like an intro to apologetics, which, I think this is an important reminder. We've talked about it before, but I want to say again, really anything we talk about on Theology Thursday is an intro. Don't listen to one of our podcasts and think that you're there, like you've studied that topic now. That is by no means true. We're not the experts. The idea is we're students in an ecumenical space discussing matters of faith and theology. So we want to give you an introduction. We want to share with you how it's impacted our lives and some of the things we've learned through it. But that's a launching point for you to continue studying these things further. So if it's something that sparks interest, we want to be able to start the conversation and then point you to resources so you can keep studying for yourself.
Right. Yeah. If you're not aware, apologetics is basically defending the faith, defending Christianity, trying to prove Christianity, whatever it means. And as Connor said, it's important to understand that this is just an introduction. We want to whet your appetite to continue studying further things because we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff in the next few minutes. And apologetics is really a very broad field of study. You could talk about all sorts of things. So we want to talk a little bit about that. We want to whet your appetite so that you could go do some more research. My introduction to apologetics is when I was in high school. My friend that I ran cross country with, we were just running cross country, and he'd ask me questions about the faith, and questions that made me think a little bit and required research. That was my introduction to apologetics, and I did that. My friend became a Christian through the grace of God, and I continued studying. And I've been studying for several years now, and I think apologetics is an amazing thing that a lot of people forget. So, just quick question: what is apologetics?
It's
what do you think of when you hear apologetics?
I think of defending the faith.
And I also think of my class in school, and one of the first things they said to set that up was that it actually comes from a Greek word. It's like a transliteration of a Greek word.
Apologia, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And which basically means a defense.
Yeah, a lot of people hear apologetics and they think like apology, like we're supposed to be sorry, but that's nothing to do with that.
A study found that people who use Greek words in their teaching sound pretentious.
Yeah, that's why I don't use them a lot.
But you just did something.
But I think
I'm just kidding. I like Greek.
I think it's important. I think it's important, especially in this case, because you're right. People think,
it's like apologizing for your faith,
right? Like it's the exact opposite. If anything, it's to buttress your faith, and so that was really helpful for me when I learned that. What are you?
I'm just adjusting your seating.
Okay,
it's fine. Okay, so we're gonna do an intro to apologetics. You ready, bro?
That was his water bottle.
I don't know if the microphone caught that, but it sounded like a fart. It was the water bottle.
You said the word. Okay.
Okay, it's not the first time that word's been on our podcast.
Fart's not a bad word.
Yeah.
Do you want me to apologize for that?
Yes, I want you to apologetic for it.
All right, this is my apology. I'm not apologizing for saying fart. That's not worthy of an apology.
All right, well, let's keep going.
Okay,
somebody help me.
A lot of people, when they think of apologetics, they become afraid. Why do we think that people become afraid when they hear the word apologetics? And I'm talking about people who know what apologetics means, defending the faith. I think that's scary for a lot of people. Why do people get afraid by apologetics?
Well, maybe they feel like they're not equipped to answer questions about the faith. Like maybe they're like, yeah, I believe this, but like I don't know the answer to the hard questions, right?
I think also it sounds like a lot of work, and it's funny too. My dad has so much ministry experience, and I'm quoting him, like he says this in public all the time when he talks about apologetics. He's like, it's an area that I haven't explored enough, because it's hard to think, but he hasn't had to because of the way that he does ministry, the way that he evangelizes. it hasn't been a huge part of what he does. But he's also scared. Like, you know, it's like, or at least he's expressed before in talks and stuff. Like, it's scary, and it takes time to actually try to come up with answers. Because if you come up with answers, there's going to be a rebuttal.
Right.
And then you need a rebuttal. And then you need a rebuttal to the next rebuttal. And there almost always is, but it requires a lot of work.
It does.
Did, like, Paul and the early apostles practice apologetics? Like, was this a thing?
They did. Actually, I have a scripture for us to look at, Acts chapter 17.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
That is a very, very famous
great minds think
passage. My ESV Bible app had stopped working for a second there. Let's try and open that up again.
ESV.
Yeah. It's ESV or
that
nothing.
app crashes a lot.
Actually, that's the first time this has crashed for me. Acts chapter 17. I'll just start in verse 1 and just read a little. I'm not going to read the whole thing. The point is that Paul is just giving a defense for the faith. Now, when they had passed through Amphipolis, maybe that's how you pronounce that, and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews. And Paul went in, as was his custom, and on 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them from the Scriptures. Take note of that. He reasoned with them from the Scriptures. Verse 3, explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead, and saying, this is Jesus, whom I proclaim to you, is the Christ. And some of them were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a great many of the devout Greeks, and not a few of the leading women. And it goes on. And then there's Paul in Athens, further down in Acts chapter 17, starting in verse 16. Now while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, his spirit was provoked within him, for he saw that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. And some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also conversed with him. And some said, what does this babbler wish to say? And it continues. And then starting in verse 22, Paul actually addresses the people in Athens. He gives basically a sermon that is prefaced with an apologetic. He starts in verse 22, men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious, for as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you, the God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth. And he just goes on. That passage is a very famous passage for people who love apologetics, who talk about apologetics. We could look at this and we could see that Paul is reasoning with the people.
Apologetics.
That's right.
Oh,
apologetics. That's the actual root word is Paul.
Yeah.
That's where we get that from.
Because his name was actually Paul.
Yeah, because his name was Paul.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, but it's...
Yeah.
It seems to me that the pattern there, and I know that there's more to it than that, and I'm sure we'll discuss that in a minute, but basically the gist of it, though, is that Paul will enter their philosophical framework and basically understand it and then explain how the gospel-centered framework trumps that.
Yes.
The biblical framework trumps that.
Yes. And that is ultimately the goal of an apologist, somebody who practices apologetics, to demonstrate that the Christian worldview is in fact true, and other worldviews are false. Another verse that I'd pull up that all of you, I'm sure, have heard of before is 1 Peter chapter 3, verses... I'll start in verse 14, but really the main one is verse 15. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 14. But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled. Verse 15. But in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. So that's another famous verse when people talk about apologetics. Verse 15, always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. We should be that is a call in the Bible for us to be prepared to defend Christianity. Any words on that?
No, I think that's good. Yeah, it's like one of the go-to verses. So, we see, and Johnny hinted at it, that Paul used, it seemed, a very specific technique in how he defended the faith in that context and with those people. Are there different ways to approach apologetics?
There are. There's a lot of different ways, and that's probably going to take up the meat of the rest of this episode, probably.
Now, can I make an assumption here?
Yes. Because
there is, in Scripture spells this out too, like how our life can be in some ways its own apologetic. And so we're talking like about systematic apologetics.
Yes, we are.
There's a difference there, because I think we all have a responsibility to be apologists, but I know that not every believer may know about the things we're about to discuss, and I encourage you to get into it, like the different arguments, cosmological, all those kinds of things. But if somebody may not take a systematic approach, they're not.
No.
Yeah.
I will say this. Everybody, Romans chapter 1 makes it clear that everybody in their heart knows that God exists. Okay, Romans chapter 1 says that God has revealed himself against all ungodliness, and he is revealed himself in the world, and so he is evident to everybody. Everybody knows in their heart of hearts that he exists, but people mask that in different ways. An atheist doesn't say, I believe in God, I just don't want to believe him. That's not what atheists say. An atheist would say, I don't believe in God because ... Many people mask their doubt with an intellectual approach. They have an intellectual reason as to why they don't believe in God. And so that is why we need to be... Sorry, Connor just threw something across the room.
Don't touch it. Okay.
What is that? Is that ice that came from your mouth?
No.
What is that?
I wish it was.
Are you going to edit this out?
Is that styrofoam?
It's a bottle cap.
It's a bottle cap.
Oh my goodness.
And the sound of him chewing it was really irritating me. So I had him spit it out, and I tried to throw it in the trash can. But can you just keep going? It's fine.
I'm sorry. I was very distracted by that. People mask their doubt with an intellectual argument as to why God can't exist or something. And that's why we need to be prepared with an intellectual rebuttal to that. Again, this is not for everybody. Some people may not accept Christianity for emotional reasons, for something in their past, or maybe they're just apathetic to it. There's many different ways to evangelize to somebody, and all of that falls under the apologetics. What we're talking about today is a more systematic, intellectual approach to apologetics.
Yeah.
So your life is an apologetic for the faith.
I think Johnny's point is good, just to know that like every Christian is called to, one, live a godly life that supports the message you're trying to get across, is a life that's obedient to Christ, but also that every Christian is supposed to study the Scripture,
right,
and be learning the truths of God every day, and just from that can flow into our conversation. So at a base level, everybody that's a believer is called to do those two things.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Let's get into some of the deeper stuff.
Let's get into all the complicated methodology and stuff. There are several disclaimers to this. Okay, the first one, or what is required to study apologetics? That's a question I'm going to answer right now. First, studying apologetics requires biblical knowledge. Okay, apologetics deals with how to defend what you believe. In order to defend what you believe, you must know what you believe first.
Oh my word, mind blown.
Yes, I know. It's very surprising to some people. You have to know what you believe before you're able to defend what you believe.
I do think for new believers it's important because they get really fired up about defending the faith, which is great, but take some time to know what it is that you're defending first.
Right. Read your Bible. study theology, be in church
Listen
on a
to
weekly
Theology
basis.
Thursday.
Listen to Theology Thursday. Surround yourself with godly people.
Like
it is
me and Ryan.
super vital if you want to study apologetics. Firstly, you have to know what you believe, and that requires digging into the Word. Okay.
Totes.
The second thing is that you must be, if you want to study this, you have to accept that this is going to take a lot of work. Okay. You're not going to become like an apologetic wizard overnight.
I mean, you basically will be once you're done listening to this podcast, but that's besides the point.
Right.
Well, I think also it's important, like, if you, even if you did become an apologetic wizard, and I mean, maybe I'm jumping the gun talking about this, because we still haven't gotten to the kind of the meat of this, but, like, just, at the end of the day, there's going to be a jump of faith with people, and I think, like, you have to be careful. There's always more to learn, and so you're never going to have an exhaustive apologetic library.
Right. You will always be learning.
Because there's and plus there's a spiritual aspect to it. If somebody's pride is causing them to resist the tug of God's Spirit, then it's not saying that the apologetics is fruitless, but that it can only go so far. That at the end of the day,
and we're going to talk about that later too. But yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so those are my little disclaimers. You must know what you believe, and you must be ready to actually put in effort to study. So let's talk about different methods of apologetics. The first one. And this is the first one because it is the oldest method of apologetics, is called classical apologetics. Okay, classical apologetics is a method of apologetics in which you use classical theistic arguments to prove the existence of God. Okay.
In other words, water is wet, so God must exist.
Absolutely. There are actually many different arguments that you could use in the classical approach. Many you've already heard before, and when I explain these, you'll be like, yeah, I've heard that argument. In fact, you may even realize I've used that argument before in talking to non-believers. So examples would be the cosmological argument for the existence of God, the teleological argument for the existence of God, or the moral argument for the existence of God. The cosmological one, I'm sure you've used before. The argument says that all things that have beginnings had to have causes. So if something exists, it must come from somewhere. It must have been made into existence. And so it must have a cause, something that made it, like a house. You see a house, it didn't exist for eternity past, and it's always been standing there, that house. It had to have a creator. It had to have a cause.
It evolved.
The house did not evolve from like a rock.
No, and what I think is so interesting about that argument is it makes a lot of sense, but also you don't even have to be a Christian to use that argument. It was actually a Muslim philosopher who developed the final form of that, and it's
So everything has a cause. If it exists as a cause, the universe exists, and the universe had a beginning. The universe did not exist for eternity past. It is not an eternal universe. Science even demonstrates that. Therefore, the universe had a cause, and the cause must exist outside of this entity. So the cause of the universe has to exist outside of the universe. And so that's where we get God from. God exists outside the universe, and so God created the universe. That's the basic argument for the cosmological argument for the existence of God. And as Connor pointed out, yes, I mean, this argument was really developed by a Muslim. The teleological argument.
Which, by the way, doesn't make it any less, useful. It's a great tool.
Yes. The teleological argument is very similar. Okay? The teleological argument says that everything that is designed has a designer. So I'm wearing a watch right now. Okay? It is a digital watch. It's not like an analog.
It's an ugly watch,
Yeah,
too.
it's a really ugly watch. I bought it at Walmart for $20.
What? You spent $20 on that thing?
I can't.
I wouldn't
something
have
like
spent
that.
$5 on that.
I don't know. How much did you spend on your watch, Johnny?
Oh, no, let's not talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought. Spend more than $20 on your watch. Anyways,
spend $20 a month.
this watch is very obviously designed. Okay, it didn't just like spontaneously generate on my wrist, although that would be cool. It is obviously designed. And if it is designed, it has to have a designer. Somebody put thought and work into creating this. Okay, so therefore, the designer would be just a human. But to take it up, a notch up, the universe. Okay, the teleological argument says that the universe appears to be designed, and so if the universe is designed, the universe must have a designer, and that designer is God. Okay, and examples people use is like the DNA sequence is like really large, and like the Earth is fine-tuned to human habitation. Humans can live on Earth because it's been placed perfectly, stuff like that. There are many other examples to that. So that's to show that the universe is fine-tuned. It is fine-tuned because it had somebody tuning it, and that is God.
But the teleological argument also brings in the idea of purpose. So, like,
yes.
Something's designed, we know it has a designer, but normally a designer designs something, yes, for beauty, but also a lot of times those things also have.
Yes, that is also another important aspect of that. The other one I have listed here under classical apologetics is the moral argument for the existence of God. The moral argument begins with the fact that all people recognize some kind of moral code. Okay, we all believe here on Theology Thursday that murder is wrong.
Oh,
Do we agree with that, Connor?
Probably
murder
should
is
have
wrong.
picked a different moral argument. I'm not sure I can. No, yes, yeah, murder. Yeah, no,
okay.
that's wrong. Yeah.
If you go,
I'm with you, by the way.
Yeah.
if you go to some
murder,
kind
bad.
of, if you go to some kind of like tribe in like the Pacific, it's isolated. If you go there and you talk to those people, they would also agree that murder is wrong. Okay. So everybody has some kind of moral code, and everybody's moral code is basically the same. Murder is wrong, lying is wrong, cheating is wrong, giving to charity is a good thing, being selfless is a good thing. And so when we argue over right and wrong, we appeal to a higher law that we assume everyone is aware of and holds to, and is not arbitrary. And is so if we are appealing to a higher law, that law must have a moral that law must have a moral lawgiver. Somebody must have created this law. And so the argument is because of that, because we have some kind of objective morality, then there is a moral lawgiver who exists above us, and that moral lawgiver is God. So somebody who talks a lot about this argument is C.S. Lewis in his book Mere Christianity, if you want more to read more about that.
I think that one makes a lot of sense.
It does. And there's another thing that falls into that too, and people cringe at it a little bit now because it's like so, and like I know a lot of atheists get mad at this argument, but like the whole like if a lot of atheists would argue that there is no absolute truth. I mean, and there can't be in a Darwinian mode of thinking. But then at the same time, you can't tell me that something's right or wrong if there is no absolute standard of truth. And I think that that's also at least a very good area to explore. You know, like
Right.
things can't be objectively beautiful, and that means that you can find evil things. Like you could easily say that something evil is objectively good, and vice versa, because there's no standard of that.
Right. But most atheists, Darwinian thinking, atheists would agree that the actions of Hitler, were wrong. That those
wrong.
were evil.
Yeah.
So but that's contradictory to the worldview that they claim to have.
Right. But here's what's surprising to me is some atheists will then reduce themselves to, well, that's my morals are a survival mechanism, but they're still good. And I'm just like, I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, no, it falls apart pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yes. If you want more research on the classical method of apologetics, a key guy today who is a classical apologist is R.C. Sproul. He wrote a book on it that's a good introduction, Defending the Faith. He delves into classical arguments for God's existence.
He has audio lectures that are available on Legionnaire.com.
That is true.
That are also good.
And a final word on classical apologetics. Every method of apologetics that we're going to talk about today, they're not perfect, okay? And so classical apologetics is not a perfect method. Here's why I think it's not perfect. As Connor already demonstrated, cosmological argument for the existence of God was developed by Muslim philosophers. When you use classical arguments, these arguments do not prove the Christian God, okay? The cosmological argument does not prove the triune God of the Bible. The teleological argument doesn't either, and neither does the moral argument or any other arguments that you find in classical apologetics that I'm aware of. The classical arguments prove the existence of a God. So, what needs to happen after you lay out these arguments in a discussion is you need to use further evidence to prove the Christian God. And that's where I feel classical apologetics falls short. You're merely proving the existence of some kind of God, not the Christian God. So that's what I have to say about that.
That's a good disclaimer. I think it makes me even more excited to talk about the two other methods of apologetics that we're going to discuss.
Yeah, just to give you a quick preview, the next two methods that we're going to discuss over the coming weeks are evidential apologetics, and then my favorite, presuppositionalism. Those are going to be fun.
Those are big
discussions.
words.
Those are big words.
Those episodes are going to be a lot more funner than they sounded just
yes,
then.
I would say this. Apologetics, you use a lot of big words and they sound boring. It doesn't have to be boring. We can make it fun for you.
And it shouldn't be.
And it's really interesting stuff. So, yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. I want to give this proper treatment and to, get you all ready to do some more studying.
For sure.
It's all good stuff.
So we've given you one. We've given you somebody you can go to study more, and we encourage you to do that. So this is part one of our intro to apologetics. Next week, we are going to take a brief break to have a special guest on the show. Saul Pitchon from New Life Solutions is going to come and share. And we've talked about pro-life ethics on the show before. In fact, starting next week, this will be the most talked about topic on Theology Thursday, which is something I'm actually really proud of because it's an important topic.
Yeah.
So Scott Maheron's been on the show twice. Saul's going to come on the show. This probably won't be the last time. We're already talking about future episodes and maybe a little crossover with Saul and Scott together, kind of talking about the different aspects of pro-life ministry. It's really exciting, and he's such a fun guy to talk to. Like, you, honestly, this isn't to say anything bad about the people we've had interviewed on here before, but this might be our best interview just because you, after having a conversation with Saul about pretty much anything, you'll literally go away thinking, that's the best conversation I've ever had. Just because his voice is just really fun to listen to. It lends itself well to a podcast. He's got like a radio voice. But he's just such a passionate and a caring person, and it really shows in everything he does. But he's also really smart, so it's like, that's a great combo. So I'm super excited about that. We'll do that next week. In the meantime, we hope you guys begin studying some of this stuff on your own. And if you do and you run into any questions or any things that you learned that you'd like to share with us, you can always email us at theologythursdaypodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, yeet.
As always, thank you for listening to Theology Thursday. You can find old episodes on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, YouTube, and Podbean. You can send questions that you want us to answer on the show to theologythursdaypodcast@gmail.com, and you can also find us on Instagram and Facebook. We hope to have you back next Thursday.